My name is Kristen Go. I am the editor-in-chief of CalMatters. For those of you who don't know, CalMatters is the largest nonprofit newsroom, and largest nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom covering California policy and its impact on people. And we're incredibly happy to have you all here to join us in what I think is going to be a pretty fabulous conversation about how we solve California's housing and homelessness crisis. Because as you all know, this is one of the biggest issues facing California. Before we do that, though, I want to offer you a brief introduction into a tool that I think is going to be incredibly useful for all of you if you do not already know about it. It's called our Digital Democracy Tool. And this is a great way for you to keep track of all the bills that you are interested in regarding housing and homelessness and anything else. You can look up the bill's progress, you can look up the sponsors, you can look up who's lobbying for and against this. We're going to give you a very brief tour of digital democracy, and then we'll bring up the guests for this evening.
As newsrooms contract, we need new ways for Americans to understand and engage with government. Developed and introduced in California, digital democracy builds trust through transparency. A user-friendly portal provides unprecedented access for the public, while artificial intelligence guides journalists to important stories. Every word spoken in public hearings, every dollar donated to politicians, every bill introduced, every vote cast. Its AI studies this data and generates story tips for journalists. That means local newsrooms can once again tell their audiences what's happening in government in smart, insightful ways.
CalMatters Digital Democracy Database reveals Alexandra's Law was one of at least three fentanyl-related bills that died in 2023 because Democrats simply refused to vote. Before Digital Democracy's new video search tool, it was nearly impossible to know if someone was absent or simply chose not to vote on the record. But by making it easier for the public to see things like this with a simple search, these women think they'll have no choice but to change the way they work.
The ambitious next phase is to make digital democracy available to other states and eventually at all levels of government. Citizens everywhere deserve simpler ways to hold their leaders to account. Digital democracy is bringing back civic engagement, and it's using AI to change the future of journalism. There's truly nothing else like it.
So I hope you guys take the time to check that out. It's calmatters.org or calmatters.digitaldemocracy.org. Please check it out. It is only in California right now. We do have plans to expand it. But without further ado, I am going to bring on Marisa Kendall, who is our homeless reporter, and she will be in conversation with Nikki Jones. So Marisa, come on up.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I cover homelessness for CalMatters, and I'm here with Nikki Jones, who's the executive director of the Sacramento Regional Coalition to End Homelessness. So she's going to give us a little bit of her perspective as someone who's actually been on the ground, working on these issues and, talking to folks in our homeless communities about, what might work for them. So to kick us off, I just wanted to start by asking you, what are some misconceptions about unhoused people that you often hear that you'd like to clear up today?
Sure. That's a big question. First, I'll just say thanks for having me. Thank you to CalMatters for the important nuanced reporting that y'all do on this issue. And also, for hosting a workshop with such a ambitious title, and really appreciate and hope to hear some transformative ideas tonight from the panel, and just really thankful to be here. So appreciate you. Yeah, I think the biggest misconception that I hear is that it is a choice, or that it is the fault of someone experiencing homelessness. This is a long-term systemic issue that is, we have a housing system that is based in a speculative market that for decades and decades has left, honestly, millions and millions of people behind. This is a market that has always held a racial bias through racial covenants, redlining, outright segregation, even ongoing segregation. If you look at Sacramento today, we are one of the most diverse cities, but we continue to be one of the most segregated cities. And so this, we also experienced sort of the onset of modern day homelessness really came along in the late 70s and early 80s with the defunding of public housing through the Housing and Urban Development and the United States Department of Agriculture, who had funded quite a lot of housing previous to that. And that was really a response to civil rights movements that had fought for the end to the exclusion of Black people and other people of color, and also some limited protections for people with disabilities. They really fought and won during that time period. And after that, there was a backlash, much like the backlash we're seeing today under the current administration, that to defund these programs, right? So we're seeing it today with the 50% slash of the HUD budget, and that going mostly towards fair housing and other things that we have tried to enact to sort of repair the harm of our past practices. So I want to say that it's not a choice, that it's a system problem, and that it's also been so directly tied not just to recessions, but also directly tied to rate of increase of rents. And so, we can point the finger at people. We can say, this is a mental health issue or a drug issue. And we know those issues abound. Those issues abound in the housed community as well. And that, for folks on the street, it has been studied, and it's actually something that happens. Those things are things that happen to people sort of after they're on the streets, after they've been experiencing homelessness, and they sort of then experience the trauma-related mental health issues and turn to drugs as a strategy for coping. And so, yeah, I just, turning those sort of ideas around, turning it back on the system, putting the responsibility back on the system, I think is probably one of the most important reframes that our system needs to do to be able to achieve the transformative change we really need.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, drugs, mental illness, the research now really shows that the number one cause that people report of their homelessness is financial reasons, right? It's not that drugs are causing the vast majority of homelessness, right?
Right. Yeah, we're increasingly seeing a very aging homeless population, actually, a very population rife with disability. And, it's a shame on our communities that we're not taking this more urgently, more seriously for our elders and for our community members that really need the transformative change.
And I wanted to talk to you about homeless encampments. That's the number one, that's the number one thing that people see when they think of homelessness. They see encampments. That's the number one visual thing that people see. So the U.S. Supreme Court last summer gave cities a lot more leeway to crack down on homeless encampments. And cities, including Sacramento, are sometimes arresting people for sleeping outside or for offenses related to that. How do those arrests affect the people who live outside, as well as, our overall fight to try to end homelessness?
Sure. I'll just start by saying it's not a new strategy. Criminalization, forced displacement, evictions, destruction of personal property. We're just returning to a pre-Boise, pre-COVID era of vast criminalization that has now been okayed by this Supreme Court in a way that just undoes the meager protections that were afforded under the Boise decision. So these aren't new strategies. These are old, these are tired, and these led to the mass explosion of homelessness because what they do is they degrade and they destabilize not just individuals, but also communities. People rely on each other. That's why they live together. It degrades safety for people. It's also an intense physical and mental stressor. The homeless population experiences a life expectancy that is 20 to 30 years less than the housed population. This is a public health crisis, and we need to be treating it as one. And folks living in encampments, when we invisibilize the encampments through displacements or arrests, people are, if they're arrested, they're back out on the street in a few hours. It's not a solution. They simply have none of the stability they had before, none of the tools to survive, like their blankets that they had before. And so it really destabilizes a person's access to their next steps. And continuing on the pathways, it destabilizes them from the street outreach-based services that they've had. And I've been a street outreach worker in the city since 2013 before stepping into this particular role. And yeah, there's no substitute for the community that people build, and there's no end to the harm and damage that we are causing to individuals and communities by relying on this status quo, tired, broken, harmful, cruel strategy.
What would you like to see cities do better? How would you like to see them improve the way that they handle encampments and, the homeless response system in general?
Sure. We're obviously quite a few years away from resolving or solving homelessness overall as it is. It means we're going to be having people experiencing homelessness on our streets. We need to do a better job of meeting them where they're at with the needs that they have, providing clean water, providing sanitation, providing access to hygiene facilities. Those types of things go a long way. Helping people stabilize where they're at improves outcomes immeasurably. We need to be listening to people who are experiencing these things, people who are poor, people who are living on the margins, people who are about to be experiencing homelessness. These are the people who are the experts on what they need and how to navigate a pathway out. And they've also been left out of the conversation, anyone, I've experienced homelessness, housing instability throughout my life. They're not here at the table generally, though, when we talk about these things or when we make these decisions. And I think that's a big thing that municipalities need to change. If everyone has to carry out forced displacements, the Interagency Council on Homelessness put out best practices. They're not followed anywhere I know. I don't know one city that follows those best practices. So we're leaving behind a wealth of evidence-based research. We're leaving behind people. And it's a shame, and we can absolutely do better.
Do you have any advice for folks in terms of how to best engage people on the streets or people with lived experience, how to best, lift up those voices and listen to people?
Sure. I mean, with kindness, with respect, with dignity, without tokenization or if you're inviting folks to speak or be a part of something, feel free to pay them. You're probably paid to be there. There are all sorts of ways. It really is grounded in treating folks with the respect and dignity that you expect, and also recognizing that their lived expertise and experience might look different than yours. But the expertise that has gotten us here, the market-based strategy towards housing, is not going to be where we find the solutions, and it's caused the problem, right? So it's also going to be that we have to listen to folks about what they really need and empower and uplift their voices in a real way, and not in a tokenizing way.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that valuable advice and for your perspectives. It's great to have you.
Yeah, appreciate you again. Thank you so much.
All right, and now for the second part of our evening, we're going to call up an excellent panel to speak further about these issues. And I think they're coming up right now, but we have 3 panelists to offer the state's perspective on these issues. We have Secretary Tamika Moss, who leads the state's efforts to fight homelessness as Secretary of the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency. She was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom in 2023, and prior to that founded All Home, an organization dedicated to regional solutions to homelessness in the Bay Area. Welcome. And for the city perspective, we have Patricia Locke Dawson, Mayor of Riverside since 2020, and also Chair of the California Big City Mayors. Welcome. And for the county perspective, we have LA County Supervisor Holly Mitchell, who has served since 2020 as supervisor for the county's 2nd district, which stretches from the South Bay to Koreatown. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. So to start, I wanted to ask a little bit about what some of your jurisdictions are doing to combat homelessness that is working well. So I want to start with Mayor Dawson. Your city recently achieved the functional zero status for youth homelessness, which basically means the city has enough shelter, housing, and services for all homeless residents ages 18 through 24. Can you tell us why you focused on young people and briefly walk us through the steps it took to get to this milestone?
I am so happy to talk about that. I'll tell you. Reaching functional zero. This is huge. So I'm just so proud of this. And one of the ways we did it was being intentional in our efforts, right? And I think I'm a big believer in preventing homelessness when you can. And part of that is going to the groups that are at a high probability of becoming homeless. So we focused on our transitional aged youth who are coming out of foster care, who have an 80% chance of becoming homeless within their first year of being out of foster care. To me, this is low-hanging fruit, right? This is what you have to do, is get at these populations early, prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place, intervene, and make sure they have the supports they need. We worked with 18 different partners, including our county. I see my county supervisor out there and our CEO from the County of Riverside. We have a great relationship with our county. And we worked with our nonprofit partners, and we had weekly case call meetings for our by name registry, and we just worked through it. We got every single one of them housed. And one of my favorite stories was a young man named Gabriel. He's 18 years old, living in his car, high school student, had no support, had turned to substance abuse, and we were so persistent with him, and our group was so persistent with him. We got him into housing. He's now housed. He's now on his getting his GED, on his way to college, and getting custody back of his daughter. So he's doing well. Thank you.
That's great to hear. And Supervisor Mitchell, I also wanted to ask you about what LA County is doing. I know one of the county's big focuses has been its Pathway Home program, which basically, it goes encampment by encampment, seeks to move everyone from a specific encampment temporarily into motels and from there into housing. How has that program fared so far, both in terms of getting people out of encampments, but then also on the harder task of actually getting them from there into housing?
So much like what the mayor talked about, it's about collaboration and everybody kind of knowing our role. County has a role to play, the cities have a role to play. And so Pathway Homes in LA County is a perfect example where we've come together. Where the county is identifying services, the county is responsible for braiding funding. We ask the cities to agree to have the interim housing in their city. We try to do master leases because we're trying to move people who've found community in their unhoused space, acknowledge how important community and belonging is, and move them together. And so we've done the same way with our RV encampments. We were just talking about that in the green room. The 2nd district that I represent has the vast majority of LA County's 7,000 RVs on the street. Same strategy to approach an entire community, try to move them together. And so I think it's when there is kind of separation of duties, everybody is clear about what everybody's role is. We partner with law enforcement, we partner with nonprofit organizations to do the outreach. Meaningful outreach is important for people to be engaged in the decision about being housed, where they're housed, for us as government to acknowledge that it's not a cookie cutter approach. Everyone doesn't want to be in congregate living. If you are a mother with a 14-year-old son, you don't want to go into a shelter where he can't be in the family unit with you. So we have to build the kind of settings that work for people. And so I think that we're all getting smarter acknowledging and respecting who our unhoused family, friends, and neighbors are and their unique needs. And I think we're doing better. LA County Pathway Homes is working. Our RV encampment removal process is working. We've removed 700 RVs in the last year and a half. Brought about 1,300 people in to interim. About a quarter of them are now in permanent supportive housing. So we're building it collaboratively, county, city, and our nonprofit partners.
So at a quarter now in permanent housing,
Yes.
how do you get over that hurdle of moving folks from the motel into permanent housing? I know often that's a place where people can get stuck, sometimes for years.
Because we have to build it. You know, housing is the solution, in my humble opinion, to houselessness. And we all know, all of you in your areas, that we are behind the 8 ball in terms of building housing. I see my La Casa brother out there. It's a new regional agency serving LA County where all 88 cities in the county are coming together to build affordable housing. We have to build it. And it has to be affordable. So I think that's the issue. We have to build, and we have to build appropriately, and we have to build affordable. When I say appropriate, it has to meet the true needs of people. It has to acknowledge the complexities of their families, age, disability, but we have to build it so we can move people into those places.
And Secretary Moss, I'd love to get your perspective on what our cities and counties are doing well and what maybe they're not doing so well when it comes to combating homelessness. So what would you like to see more and maybe less of from our local leaders?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on this panel with these amazing women. And I think both of them spoke to the importance of partnership. You know, the challenge of homelessness takes the entire ecosystem working together to try to scale the solutions that we know work. And when I think about what's working, I think about all the work that our communities are doing every day to end homelessness for people. And that is happening in the thousands. Just in the last year, we housed more than 60,000 people across the state of California. So we actually know how to disrupt the cycle of homelessness for folks. I think the challenge we have is that it is difficult to scale the solutions that we know work. And so one of the things that I think about in terms of, I think it's Supervisor Mitchell spoke to this, everybody sort of knowing their role, but everybody also being willing to acknowledge that it is solvable. I think that actually has to be the first step, because if we are just trying to maintain a challenge rather than solve a challenge, it is a different orientation to what is actually possible. And I think what's so exciting is that this administration over the last 6.5 years has made homelessness and housing one of their top priorities. This governor invested in housing and homelessness more than any other administration in California's history. So when you have a belief that homelessness can be solved, you have partners, cities, counties, nonprofits, people who have lived experiences working together to resolve the crisis of homelessness. And you have to actually have the housing and services needed to facilitate those exits from the streets. That is what works. Now, you asked about what's not working. I think the challenge we have is the inflow into homelessness. Many of you know I've been a service practitioner for many years. I've worked on the advocacy side, so very intimately familiar with families, young people, our elders who are falling into homelessness faster than we can house folks. So just in Los Angeles, Supervisor, you know this better than I do. For every 207 people housed in Los Angeles, 227 become unhoused during the same period of time.
Like daily.
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 So we are not going to be able to address the scale of our crisis when those are the realities that we're contending with. So I do think figuring out how we invest in concurrent strategies interim housing for our brothers and sisters who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness right now and need to come inside and heal and be on a journey to permanent housing. More permanent housing. We need to build housing faster and cheaper. And like the mayor said, we need to prevent homelessness before it happens. And if we can do those things concurrently, I think we will be able to see much more impact across the state.
Thank you. Another thing that I think has been on everyone's minds lately is enforcement. As we all know, last summer, the U.S. Supreme Court, in its Grants Pass ruling, gave cities more leeway to ban encampments in public places, such as sidewalks and parks. And since then, many cities and counties have passed ordinances doing just that. Mayor Dawson, Riverside passed an ordinance in October that makes it illegal to camp near schools and shelters or in parks and wildland areas. But at the same time, I know Riverside, as most cities do, has a shortage of shelter beds. So with that in mind, what, if anything, has this ordinance accomplished so far?
We've cleared some of the encampments that have been the most dangerous, I would say. And some of these are ones in our river bottom. Some of them are ones near our schools. And when I say dangerous, I mean there are people in those encampments that are being victimized. I think that's one of the biggest things we need to keep in mind. We're always balancing, the needs of our community, but there's communities there as well, and we need to ensure the safety of the people that are in those encampments. So that's a big part of what we're doing. We always offer services first, and we have not had a shortage of shelter beds for the folks that we have offered services to out of those encampments. And I want to set the record straight on that. We have had enough for folks. We offer them services. We offer them a way back to their communities of origin so they can get the support they need, which is part of it. And we also, make sure that they are aware of their rights. We protect the things that they have, their possessions. We make sure they have those. So we are being very compassionate. We're ensuring they're being treated with dignity. We're not coming through with a bulldozer and taking them out. That is not at all what we are doing. We are ensuring that these people are being treated humanely and safely. And that's probably the primary, I think, the primary objective of that ordinance.
There's a bill that was making its way through the legislature, SB 634, by Senator Perez, that would have prohibited cities from punishing people for sleeping in public places. That was really radically amended this week, and it would not do that anymore. Now it would focus instead on preventing cities from punishing advocates who hand out aid to unhoused people. And it would also prevent cities from barring the construction of shelters and permanent supportive housing in their jurisdiction. What do you make of that development? Can you comment on that bill and these changes that we've seen?
I haven't seen the changes, so I'm going to be honest about that. I saw the bill in its original form, and there's been a lot of discussion about this amongst our big city mayors, which is a bipartisan group of mayors. I think we all know that criminalizing homelessness is not what we want to do, right? And that's not at all what we're trying to do. I think our first and foremost goal is to offer services, get people the help they need, and if they don't accept that help, that's on them, right? That's where they are. I know my colleague in San Jose, Mayor Matt Mahan, has a number now. He says if they refuse services 3 times, that they will arrest them. They will cite them according to theirs. We are not there in Riverside, but I think there's a sort of sentiment now that's growing among people that we want to see the people get the help they need, and we need to balance the needs of our communities with that.
Thank you. Supervisor Mitchell, let's talk about what LA County is doing in terms of enforcement. I know after the Grants Pass decision, LA County said, it would not criminalize homelessness. The LA County Sheriff said something similar. But at the same time, the county is continuing to clear homeless encampments, more than 700 last year. And, you know, delivery of resources is sometimes lagging. Last year, the Sheriff's Office Homeless Outreach Services team made contact with 1,269 people, but only got 185 of them into shelter or housing. Can you tell me a little bit about those efforts and what they're accomplishing?
So, think about it. You are living where you are living, and someone walks up that you don't know, perfect stranger, and says, I'd like for you to come inside because where you're living is unacceptable. And, oh, I don't have a place for you to take your pet, or you're a family. Oh, you're not married. I don't have a place where you can be placed together as a couple. Would you go? So I think that we have to, again, be thoughtful about our interactions, thoughtful and patient, and support people in making their decision, making sure we are building options that meet their unique needs. And so our sheriff host team works collaboratively with the nonprofit organizations, and we do as many touches as is necessary to build relationship, to build trust, to listen, to understand that this encampment is in of itself a community. And if we can do a master lease and move everyone together, it increases the likelihood that people will come in. So I think all of us throughout the state have our experiences in terms of what works better and what doesn't work. But this notion that people are going to trust us, move to where we say we're asking them to move, that they're going to give up their RV to move to a motel for 30 days. And then what, Supervisor Mitchell? Those are all valid points. And so I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do with the host team. Does it take time? Yes. Do we have a responsibility to build trust, to work collaboratively with our unhoused family, friends, and neighbors? I think we do, to increase the likelihood of a positive outcome. The churn is what's killing us all. When I talk to unhoused constituents, oh, I did that program, Supervisor. Oh, I was at this motel. It's the churn. If we can do an appropriate placement with wraparound services to help people stay housed, it's the churn that is also what burns up our budgets. If we could invest on the front end, get people housed and keep them housed, I think we'll all be feeling better. And that horrible 207 housed, 211 unhoused, that differential will begin to change.
Marisa, can I add to that just really quickly? I'm sorry, but I want to go back to our youth homelessness. One of the big reasons we've been successful with that is we have them placed in a facility. It's our Aspire facility with multiple partners where they have wraparound services on the facility, on the site. We have a young mother with 2 children. She's 18 years old. She has 2 kids. We're providing her childcare. We're giving her support she's got medical care. She's got workforce development care. She's got, educational consulting or academic advising. So I think to Holly's point, we are setting her up for success so we don't have to deal with it much later. And that investment is going to bear fruit.
Thank you. I know the state also has a role in this. You know, the state has done a number of things to try to address these encampments, from the Encampment Resolution Fund, the governor's executive order last year pressuring cities to clear camps. There's been a lot of recent rhetoric about accountability for homelessness dollars. From your perspective, and for these state efforts, what's working and what isn't so far?
Well, I think it's really important to make sure that, and I think, both the mayor and Supervisor Mitchell spoke to this, we have to be really deliberate about how we engage our unhoused neighbors. And when we are clearing encampments and providing options for people to come indoors, it's important to understand that that needs to be progressive engagement. It needs to be compassionate. It needs to be thoughtful, so that we are offering folks an opportunity to get on a path to permanent housing. And so it is critical that we bring as many of our neighbors inside as quickly as possible. Our encampments are a manifestation of what is failing around society.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to facilitate compassionate engagement, which I think is what, our guidance, I have my executive officer here from our Interagency Council on Homelessness, Megan Marshall, in the audience. We issued guidance to really help cities and counties think about how do we do this in a way that keeps them safe, gets folks out of dangerous encampments, brings folks indoors, but doesn't just have them stop at interim housing. We need to be able to provide opportunities for folks to have that permanent housing, which means we have to accelerate our housing production. So I think that that is a strategy that we know works. We provide technical assistance for local jurisdictions who are engaging in encampment resolution. And I think we've seen tremendous success with our encampment resolution funds, where local jurisdictions are working together in partnership with their county partners, their city partners, nonprofit organizations, and others to really resolve these encampments in a way that provides opportunity for those who are living on our streets. So I think it is important to acknowledge that the encampment crisis, in my mind, is not what we need to be preserving. It is figuring out how we address the systemic issues that got us here in the first place. And I think that that is sort of the ultimate goal, and criminalization of our most vulnerable folks is not the goal. And so it's really important to hold ourselves accountable. We've been really talking, the governor talks a lot about accountability, which means for those folks who are engaged in disrupting those cycles of homelessness, that is fantastic, and we want our communities to be able to do that. But for cities and counties who are not willing to build deeply affordable housing or permanent supportive housing for our community members, we want to hold folks accountable around building their fair share and doing their part to address the crisis. So I think it is and we do a lot of that through the way we manage our funds. And so holding folks accountable for the outcomes of resolving unsheltered homelessness is our ultimate goal.
I completely agree. And I think we all hear the term accountable, and I think sometimes it means different things to different people, you know? My house residents want to hold me accountable for the RV in front of them. The RV dwellers want to hold you. So from my perspective, I have no issue with accountability. My only concern, and it's what we're all confronting, is consistency. LA County, we've just had our second year of a point in time count where our numbers are going down. And the thing that wakes me up at 3 a.m. is if we take our foot up off of that accelerator in the least, we could see a reversal. And so it's continued commitment, continued funding from the state, continued funding from every level of government, because we're clear about what's working. The three of us haven't said anything that contradicts each other. We know what works. It's the issue of being able to continue to fund it, to continue to see that progress. So accountability, yes, but consistency in funding, I think, is going to be a critical element as well.
And just to a further point on that, Supervisor, I know, that's exactly right. California actually is one of the only states in the country that saw a reduction overall in homelessness in this last point in time count. So not just Los Angeles, but the entire state of California. So it is evidence, as you described, that it takes sustained investment and strategy, but it also takes persistence around holding ourselves accountable for the outcomes that we expect by stewarding those resources appropriately.
And speaking of consistency in funding, I know a lot of people here for their homelessness response rely on the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention, or HAP funds, as their main source of flexible homeless services funding. The current budget the governor has proposed this year did not include any new funds for that. Secretary Moss, what are cities and counties supposed to do if another round of HAP funding doesn't come?
Well, maybe I'll start by saying just in February, we released $750 million of HAP 6 funding. So part of what we are really striving to do, and we're doing this in several ways, I've asked all of my departments within my agency to not only be thinking about, budget times are cyclical. And we are in a time of great difficulty at the state budget level. But it doesn't mean that we should take our foot off the gas in terms of putting the resources that are currently available to the best use that we can. We have more than 40,000 units of housing in our pipeline that has funding. So we want to make sure that our cities and counties in the state are executing on delivering on the resources that are currently available. So I look forward to conversation between the administration and the legislature about how do we maintain that momentum? How do we keep demonstrating to our communities that we are doing the right things with those resources so that we can generate more as time goes forward. So I think it's really important to make sure that the resources that are currently out there, we have Prop $1, more than $2.1 billion available for our veterans who are experiencing homelessness, our neighbors who have behavioral health and mental health challenges. Those resources are available in addition to our other affordable housing programs that serve our unhoused neighbors. So I want to make sure that we are delivering on our promise of stewarding outcomes for those resources. And I'm hopeful that the negotiations between the legislature and the administration continue.
Thank you. Mayor Dawson, what about you? What will Riverside do if we don't get that other round of HAP funding?
That's not going to happen. Not going to happen. What have we said is our highest priority in the state? It's housing people. It's addressing our homelessness crisis. Are we going to not continue to fund HAP? I just don't see that as happening. And I mean, if it doesn't, I suppose we go back to piecing things together, working with my great folks at the county to help us with certain things. But and our nonprofits and our federal partners. I mean, this is how it's been done all these years, and we've never stopped it. HAP has just made it easier, I think, for us to address the specific needs of our community, particularly as the big 13 mayors in the state of California. I mean, that HAP money, we housed, I don't know how many, 240,000 people last year. We stood up 16,000 shelter beds among us. We put people into permanent housing with HAP money. And I think the thing with HAP money that's so important is that it's specific to the communities that are using it, and it's flexible. Like, one of the first things I did as mayor when I came into office was look at our population. I'm a scientist by training, so I look at data and I said, okay, who are our homeless populations and what do they need? 14% are struggling with drug addiction or some other type of addiction. 13% have behavioral health issues. I think there was something like 20+% were formerly incarcerated. We had transitional age youth. We had women over 50 becoming homeless rapidly. We have these populations that we know we can address with specific programs, and that's how we're doing it. We're going by population, by population, by population. And Riverside's been very successful in implementing these programs. So we're seeing great gains because of it. So we can't take our foot off the gas. We cannot do that. And HAP funding is just essential for us to solve this crisis in the state.
And even with HAP funding, I know a concern of a lot of people here is the fact that it's always, one-time grants. There's never an ongoing source of funding for homelessness that you can count on year after year. Tell me a little bit about how that impacts what you fund in Riverside and your ability to fund, long-term programs like, shelter beds that are supposed to be there for a long time.
We are using our HAP money to do the things that we know we can maintain long term, right? Because it is, as many of you know, HAP funding is every year it's allocated, every year it's appropriated. So we won't take a risk on putting that money into something that we know can't be funded long term. So we're doing things like buying hotels that we can convert and use our funding to help maintain, right? We're putting money into the Aspire program, as I mentioned, with assistance from the county. The county's been a huge part of that. Anything where we can match Prop $1, where we can bring money in and help with mental health services. So we won't put something into something that won't continue. We will use it. We will leverage that money with our nonprofit partners, with our county partners, and with our federal dollars to ensure that these programs that we're implementing are sustainable.
Mm. And Supervisor Mitchell, do you want to weigh in on this one as well?
You know, I'm sitting here thinking, you know, my fear about HAP dollars going away is remembering being a staffer, lobbying for Western Center during kind of the Great Recession, when it was a perfect storm, which is really kind of what we're confronting now. When we weren't keeping up with building, so supply, you know, was continuing to be challenged. When we hit the recession, we hit all of the programs that people need to sustain themselves. You know, there was a proposal to eliminate CalWorks. Well, it was cut severely. You know, housing vouchers were cut back. So we squeezed. So none of us should be, and that was at every level of government, federal government, state, all the way down. So we shouldn't be surprised that we have the unhoused numbers we do today, because we should have seen it coming based on how we squeezed the life out of these life-sustaining programs. So when I say we can't go back and keep our foot on the accelerators, because I saw what happened in a contracted economy when government cuts programs, when people need them the most, and we can't keep repeating that cycle. And so for HAP to continue to allow us to dig ourselves out of this ditch that public policy decisions and budget cuts help create is really our only solution. You know, I spent probably too many years up here as budget chair, which, you know, warped my thinking. So, you know, one-time money or annual investments that will ultimately end prevent us from developing long-term solutions. We know that providing wraparound services is what keeps people housed. And so while the one-time dollars, the HAP dollars, if they are temporary, allows us to infuse investments into the community, but how we keep people housed will continue to be the challenge. And so acknowledging that we didn't reach our unhoused population overnight, we are not going to solve for it overnight. And it's going to take time and consistent investment that locals can count on to be able to step out there and do these pilots and invest over time. It's having lived through that history where, and it's not ancient history, it's recent history, that I hope that we don't forget so we don't repeat those same actions.
And I think too, I want to go back to the prevention piece, right?
Yeah.
Those HAP dollars can be used for prevention, keeping people in their homes, right? Rental assistance, we've
Yeah.
used it for that. I think that's a huge thing. Once somebody becomes homeless and is homeless for a year, their chances of becoming chronically homeless skyrocket. So if you can keep them in their homes, number one, I don't think you will be seeing, you know, the problems on the other end. But that's the thing about these funds is use them wisely when they're there. Maybe they're a one-time thing, but use them intelligently so that they can have the most impact.
Mm. Okay. Another thing I wanted to bring up, whenever I ask people about solutions to homelessness, and it's already come up several times in this conversation, people always bring up the idea of partnerships between cities, counties, the state, nonprofits, other agencies working together, you know, combining their various funding sources, addressing different aspects of the crisis. But, you know, we all know those relationships can be tricky, to say the least. Supervisor Mitchell, LA
Come to me first, talking about tricky relationships. Give it to the mayor. Okay, let me hear the question. Let me hear you. Tricky.
It may or may not be about LAHSA.
Oh.
LA County recently voted to pull its funding out of LAHSA, the joint city-county agency that oversaw the region's homeless services. I know you abstained on that vote. I know this has been, you know, a very tricky situation. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And, you know, what is this upheaval going to mean for, you know, both the health of the relationship between the city and the county, and just for the future of homeless services in your county?
You know, sometimes we as government, an audit comes through, we want to be accountable, and somehow we just think, well, if we just build something different over here, it'll be different. And I don't necessarily know that that's true. LASA had an infusion of resources with the passage of Measure H and HHH in LA County a number of years ago. And then as our unhoused population grew, we continued to dump a lot of responsibility on LASA. And then did what we all sometimes do as human nature, was point the finger. It's not me, it's LASA. So I have some colleagues that decided we should pull the county dollars out of LASA and build our own department. I said, well, let me see how this will go. Since I joined the board in 2020, we have maybe 3 or 4 brand new departments that 2 or 3 years later still don't have the administrative steam or the woman power or manpower or the resources to really be effective. So my perspective is my unhoused constituents can't wait for another bureaucratic entity to be stood up to provide them with services. Did LASA have some audit challenges? Was LASA unfairly dumped upon when this infusion of dollars came out and the numbers went high? Perhaps. But I don't know that standing up another bureaucratic entity will house the people in the RV at the end of my block any faster. So that's why I abstained, I think, and it passed. And so what do we now have to do? I have to make sure that LA County residents have some kind of guarantee that this new department will be different, will be better, will have ingrained some metrics for success. We keep talking about accountability. How will the leaders of this county department be held accountable at a higher or different standard than the LASA leadership was? So it's not just a new, bright, new, shiny thing. It needs to be a better thing with the ultimate goal of getting people housed faster, more efficiently, with greater accountability, as is expected of us, of the governor and the voters, quite frankly. Thank LA County voters. They passed Measure A the last election cycle that will give us a permanent funding source for homeless services and affordable housing. Both of those elements are in Measure A. And so the transition time frame to this county department, I think, is unrealistic based on what I have lived and witnessed standing up new departments at a county the size of LA County. And I wanted to have in the motion itself metrics for success so we could look back and say, are we doing this better? And those amendments weren't accepted. But I'll continue to push.
Thank you. And I also wanted to talk with Mayor Dawson about partnerships. So one thing that can be challenging for cities and counties is addressing encampments that exist on state land, such as underneath overpasses, highway on and off ramps, property that is controlled by Caltrans. Can you tell us a bit about Riverside's relationship with Caltrans? I understand there's some potential changes coming there, an MOU you're developing, as well as potentially changes coming if SB 569 passes.
Yes, and SB 569, for those who don't know, is Senator Blake Spear's bill to have it be easier, I guess, for partners to go in and clear encampments on Caltrans rights of way. It's an issue for every city that has the freeway running through them, right? We go in and we're charged with clearing encampments, but we can't get the folks on the freeways. We just can't get access there. And we have had recent successes with Caltrans on a couple of our off ramps and on ramps to get on there, clear the encampments. And the MOU was several years in the making, so it took a while to get there. But our friends at Caltrans, they know that what's going on with them. I think one of the challenges we're going to see, and we've already seen this, is you clear the encampment on the Caltrans right of way, they end up in your neighborhood, right? So back to Supervisor Mitchell's and Secretary Moss's point, there has to be sustained resources there. You can't just say, y'all need to get out of here and we're going to take your stuff and, oh, by the way, don't come back. They need someplace to go when you clear it. So the governor's encampment resolution funds, and we've been able to use those as well when we're doing this. And we're seeing, I'll speak on behalf of the big city mayors too across the state. the city of Fresno has had enormous success in getting people off of the encampments off their freeway, and they haven't come back because they've been able to use those resolution funds to get folks housed.
Yeah, and what is the best way, to partner with an agency like Caltrans? Because, like you said, if you clear folks off of a highway overpass, they're going to come into the neighborhood. But that's what's happening right now, right? Is a lot of cities, folks are sweeping encampments out of the city, and people are ending up on, Caltrans land as a last refuge. So how, what needs to happen in that relationship to kind of be working in the same direction so you don't have that situation where people are just pushed from one place to another?
Well, how about just picking up the phone, and telling me that you're going to go out there and do an encampment resolution day? I mean, that's been the challenge, right? Is like when we find out later that that happened, and then we're like, well, what went on there? Nobody told us about this. So I think that's part of the MOU is that there has to be some coordination, collaboration, that we're out there together working on this. It isn't just Caltrans going out. It's not just the city going out. It's not just the county going out. We should be coordinating this. And I have to give it to you. I see my supervisor, Karen Spiegel, out there. And I'm going to put her on the spot here, but she's been fabulous in bringing together the surrounding cities in our river. We have a river that runs through the city there, the Santa Ana River, and developed an MOU for all of us to share information and share activity. And that's the only way you're going to be able to do this effectively, is bring folks together and say, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and we're going to call each other when we do it, right? So that we don't have surprises and we don't have anybody sharing any undue burden.
Okay, thank you. And Secretary Musk, I wanted to talk with you a little bit. We mentioned accountability multiple times already in this panel discussion. I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more on what that means for our city and county partners here today. Obviously, Governor Newsom has talked a lot in recent months about holding cities and counties more accountable for making progress in homelessness. HCD has a new accountability unit. The state now has an online dashboard to measure cities' progress. What has that accomplished so far? And what specifically can cities and counties expect? And what are you expecting from them right now?
Well, I guess I would start by saying, and it has maybe been a theme throughout this conversation, is that all levels of government have to be doing their part in order to address the homelessness crisis. And the state has a vital role to play with the resources, the guidance, the technical assistance that we offer both across our homelessness funding programs as well as our housing programs. And I think, the expectation is that local jurisdictions are doing the same, that we are able to work in partnership around bringing resources to the table. And frankly, this isn't just local jurisdictions, this is also our federal partners. We rely a great deal on our federal partners to be a part of the solution in order to address our homelessness crisis. And we see the volatility of that in this moment. And so, by having accountability, it really just means we are accountable to the people who urgently need us to resolve their housing crisis as soon as possible. Like, that is the guiding force around accountability to me. And so the way it translates is we have a housing and now homelessness accountability unit, which allows our city staff, or county, our state staff. Lord, I used to work at the city, but now I'm at the state. It allows us to be able to use data to track success. How are folks actually doing? Are people actually being rehoused with the encampment resolution funds? Are they staying housed, to your point, Supervisor? So I think we have some really important metrics for the first time in our 3-year action plan to end homelessness in the state of California. We just released this plan. It's on our Interagency Council on Homelessness website, and it outlines metrics for what jurisdictions in partnership with the state should be doing over the next 3 years to reduce homelessness in our communities. And so we want to make sure that folks have the support that they need, the technical assistance, the guidance. Caltrans provides guidance around encampment resolutions. We do as well on the ICH guidance that we provide. But then we want people to actually deliver on the outcomes. And when they don't, we want to make sure that folks are held accountable to not being partners in solving this crisis. So we have taken jurisdictions to court when they've refused to build affordable housing in their communities. We have made state lands available through our excess sites program. That's unlocked more than 20,000 units of housing just by developing housing on state lands. We have surplus lands that we're using. So I feel like it's important for us to utilize all of the resources in our toolbox, but we all have to do that. Um, the last thing I'll say is, Measure A is an example of local partners doing their part to provide resources that can be braided with state funding that gets us a lot further in our efforts to address the crisis. We tried to do this in the Bay Area through the Bay Area. I saw Belia in the audience, through BAFA, which La Casa modeled itself after. We were not able to get that funding over the finish line, but I do think that cities and counties and local jurisdictions partnering, braiding those resources together with the state resources gets us a lot further toward our mutual goals.
Mhm. And what about the two of you? How are you trying to meet the state's new expectations for accountability? Are you using new metrics and in your work to try to track these outcomes in a way that for years we hadn't really been tracking? I know Supervisor Mitchell, you mentioned with the replacement for LASA, there's going to be more of that baked in. How are you trying to make sure that we address these issues?
Well, through Measure A, unlike Measure H, it won't have a sunset. Measure H had a 10-year sunset. Measure A, we baked in metrics. And we also said if a municipality doesn't meet them, you won't get any more funding. And so, again, I don't think we're afraid of accountability. I don't think we're afraid of data collection and metrics. We just need to make sure that all of us continue to partner and the resources will continue to be available to help us be successful and meet them. So, the public, as Fannie Lou Hamer famously said, is sick and tired of being sick and tired. And yet we will tax ourselves and continue to do it, but we have to show that we're making progress. As I tell my constituents who say, you do nothing, Mitchell, and I say, I appreciate that from your perspective because the RV didn't move off your block. Your perspective is we've done nothing. But 699 other RVs have been moved, right? And so the accountability and the metrics is to hold ourselves accountable, but to also prove to our shared constituency, to be able to track and show people who have this inherent, sometimes distrust of government. The whole concept of waste, fraud, and abuse is on the tip of everybody's tongue. So the metrics allow us to show our good work. Good news is harder to promote than the bad news. Waste, fraud, and abuse, if news media was here, they would capture that phrase I've said and ignored everything else I've said for the last 20 minutes, right? Bad news spreads faster. So if we can use the metrics, talk about accountability to really help track and share the good news of the work we're doing collectively, I think it's helpful.
And as a reporter, I will say, yes, bad news is often in headlines, but we do love data and accountability metrics. So give them to us. And we love that. So yes, thank you. Mayor Dawson.
I would say, last year the governor had this rollout of these metrics. He wants to see them. And the response across my city and other big cities were, bring it. We want accountability too. It cuts both ways, but we want accountability too. And, as for most of us, we've been measuring these for some time now. City of Riverside launched a dashboard 3 years ago, right? Our own dashboard to see what we were, how, the efficacy of our various programs and how we were faring. But I will say this, there seems to be a consistent sentiment across the board that the measuring instrument is faulty as hell. That pit count, oh my God, nobody thinks that pit count is worth what it's done. It's a snapshot in time. No, is that even really? Yeah, I know. It's I know. It's it's this snapshot. It's so faulty. It's who's ever out there in the day. If it's cold, if it's hot, if it's you see somebody or somebody quits early, or I mean, it's ridiculous. And then we use that and we predicate every decision based on that. And so the big city mayors have been pushing on the governor's office and the legislature. Let's come up with new ways of measuring, please, because we know for everybody that what was the number? I think 200. I think San Diego has something for every 6 people that are housed every day, 8 more become homeless. So I mean, we know this is happening. So how are we measuring this, and is there a better way to ensure accountability?
Ditto.
I did want to just offer some more good news.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah,
Do it.
yeah, because I think it's important for folks, we know that folks are frustrated with the issue of homelessness in our communities, but I wanted to share that the UCLA Quality of Life Index that was just done said that the number of county residents who believe that the problem is getting worse declined nearly 10 percentage points from 60% in 2024 to 52% in 2025. That's something,
It
y'all.
was those 700 motorhomes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But
You're welcome.
you
You're
know,
welcome.
it just demonstrates the point that we are making a difference. And although we have so many of our neighbors still suffering on our streets, we can't forget that we actually know what to do.
I agree.
And we just have to be persistent around that. And I do think that our residents are beginning to see that.
And I would say we have to be courageous about that. We are entering, as has been discussed this entire conference, scary times. Every day we're hearing something different about a proposed cut from the federal government. And so I just think it's going to take us to be courageous and lean in hard and continue to do what we know works for our shared constituency. It's going to take courage and meaningful ongoing collaboration, as opposed to it's their fault, which sometimes we fall, because we're human, sometimes we fall prey to that. But now more than ever, because we know that we've made good traction and the numbers are beginning to turn, I just think we cannot go back.
And as you alluded to, I think something that's on a lot of people's minds right now is, there's been a lot of changes already with the new federal administration. Secretary Moss, what changes, if any, do you think could be on the horizon in terms of the way California fights homelessness based on what this new administration is doing? What should our cities and counties be aware of or looking out for?
Girl, I left my flask in the green room. Look, I will say that I just want to acknowledge the uncertainty that actions from the federal government is causing in our communities across the state. We need to breathe that in and acknowledge the fear, the uncertainty that the organizations who do the great work we've been describing all day are worried about whether or not they will be targeted for the work that they do every day to disrupt homelessness in our state. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that that is real. The administration and the governor, in partnership with the Attorney General's office, is not afraid to engage the federal government when they are in violation of California's values and human rights. And so a lot of the actions we're taking are legal. We are currently in litigation with the federal government, but we also recognize that, the severe reductions in HUD staffing, for example, in the Office of Planning that administers the disaster recovery dollars that we rely on when fires in Los Angeles and other parts of our state occur. We need those resources in order to be able to restore what has been lost in our communities. And now
not having the staff to administer those grants and work with us across, you know, party lines to deliver what Californians need so desperately, that is of concern. And so I think we are paying attention to how we protect the rights of Californians, and we're doing that on the legal front. But I also think we are being very strategic about our goals across state government and how do we utilize state resources. You know, the tariffs, you all have heard the governor talk about how impactful those are for California. So, you know, I think we're trying to not be so distracted by every inflicted assault that is coming from the federal government, but being strategic about how we leverage California's assets to protect Californians.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left. Lightning round, real quick. I'd love to hear what advice we have for, you know, our other cities and counties out here who are all grappling with the problem of homelessness. Supervisor Mitchell, let's start with you, and we'll just go down the line real quick.
Advice to my fellow.
Advice to other cities and counties for how to handle homelessness in their jurisdictions from what's worked for you.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that we have once again had this opportunity to bring CSAC and cities together. This is a shared burden and opportunity that we can't do it as individual levels of government. We have to work collaboratively. County does the services, city can deal with zoning and help us find places to house people. The solution to houselessness is building houses. And to make sure that we continue to work with our state partners to make sure that we are blending and braiding every funding opportunity, whether it's, you know, support to build or support on rent relief. Working together, bringing what we do best individually to the table, I think is what we have to do. And so it's so wonderful to hear a mayor speak so glowingly about her supervisor in terms of your partnership. And I think we have to replicate that. I'm so deeply proud to serve with my fellow La Casa directors, because this is all 88 cities in LA County who have a different history about who has embraced affordable housing and who has avoided it like the plague. So to have a space where we can come together and talk about creative models and funding proposals, and to have a funding source to make it happen. And so it's collaboration, collaboration, collaboration versus blame.
Mayor Dawson?
She stole one of my 3 things I was going to say. Collaboration and partnerships. Can't do the work alone. We have to. Know your populations. Who are you dealing with and what are their needs? Figure that out. And 3, take a multi-pronged approach to the issue, which we are doing in Riverside, which is prevention, intervention, and enforcement. I think all 3 of those things equally with compassion and adequate services is going to get you where you need to go.
Right. Secretary Moss, 1 minute. What do you think?
Well, I agree with my colleagues. I think collaboration is critical. The governor has announced a reorganization plan of my agency to stand up a cabinet level housing and homelessness agency in state government, which cements the commitment to housing and homelessness for the long term. This is an incredible opportunity for us to work together to make sure that that's just not a bureaucratic shift in how we do business, but it delivers on our collective goals of reducing unsheltered homelessness in the state of California and housing more than creating housing of 2.5 million homes that we need to build over the next 8 years. So I'm really excited to roll up our sleeves and continue our work together. It has been a pleasure to work with Graham, with Carolyn. Honestly, we can't do this by ourselves. So we will continue to work in deep partnership with everybody in this room.
Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you who came to this fabulous conversation. I want to thank Marisa for the great questions. I want to thank Secretary Moss, Mayor Dawson, and Supervisor Mitchell for this very frank conversation and for sharing your very acute perspectives. It was a fabulous conversation. If you guys look on the screen, we have some QR codes. And that's because we appreciate you showing up today. We appreciate your support. We appreciate the collaboration. But we also want to make sure that this continues, this relationship continues. So you've got QR codes that helps you subscribe to our newsletter so that you can get daily updates, weekly updates from CalMatters about the reporting that we're doing. We are also a nonprofit organization, and we believe that it is incredibly important to make sure that Californians know what's happening in their communities. And the best way to do that is to provide free information, which is what we do. We provide our stories to all the NPR affiliates in the state. We provide our stories to every single news organization in California. So if you believe in our mission, we ask that you also contribute. But at the very least, please sign up for our newsletter. We couldn't have done this today without some of our great partners. So thank you to CSAC, thank you to the League of California Cities, thank you to California Forward, Lyft, and the Sierra Health Foundation. We appreciate your time and your participation here. Thank you.